A very good morning to one and all, and welcome to our webinar series Dwelling Drupal 8. I'm Jayaprada and I work for Unity Solutions as Business Development Associate. Unity Solutions is a software development company with specialization in Drupal development services. We use open source technologies such as Drupal CMS, Falcon, and other platforms to build robust, cost effective solutions. Our expertise provides scalable and cloud-friendly solutions to publishing, e-commerce, enterprise, and education industries. Being one of the pioneers in India to adapt Drupal, we are very glad to cherish our journey with Drupal through this webinar series, Dwelling Drupal 8. And today, we have someone very eminent and special with us to deliver a session on Drupal 8 microservice. He is one of the top Drupal contributors and oldest member of Chennai Drupal community. Many of us already familiar with his fascinating story on how Drupal changed my life, featured in Dry's keynote at DrupalCon Dublin. It's a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Vijay Chandran Mani. Vijay works as senior Drupal developer for Soldat Limited. He's credited on 21 issues for past 1 year and 295 commits. He is maintainer of configuration translation module in Drupal 8 core and co-maintainer of configuration translation, date, configuration inspector, entity field query views, backend, and many more. Apart from his code contributions, Vijay is also winner in many DrupalCons. He was the winner of Trivia Night, DrupalCon 2013 Prague Team Create Table, and also bagged fourth place at Trivia Night DrupalCon 2015 Barcelona. We are very much honored and excited to have him here delivering this session for us. Vijay, thank you so much for joining us, and we welcome you to this series.
Thanks, Jayaprada. It's really an honor to present this session to all one and all. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vijay. You can reach me on Twitter, Facebook, anywhere on as VijayCS85, including IRC. Today we're gonna talk a little bit about Drupal 8 and also microservices. It's one of the key architecture that we've been working on, and I spend most of the time on this one on both my previous job and current job. So today I just thought maybe we can give it a try and see how it works well with the current modern Drupal 8 architecture. So first, a little bit of what is microservice. So this is kind of a definition, I would say. Microservice is not really any solid approach or anything that's important in the sense it's not really a complex system or anything. It's just basically an architectural design. So it is kind of a successor of service-oriented architecture, and I would say it's more like kind of defining inside service-oriented architecture how things should work. Bottom line, it's just basically trying to understand your software or applications so that you can split them into small pieces of components so they can run independent of each other, or they can build independent of each other in a way that it acts as a small, less complex system, or it kind of a simple system as its own, but everything together work in a very common way, most often like a REST endpoint, so that they can talk to each other, but they still maintain as a small component that does one single job. This is more of theory. What is microservice is. So let's look at in an example what that definition really means. So first, imagine you need to build a website, either Drupal or any other technology. Then, for a small movie theater website. So the main thing that we can think in terms of functionality, we need to maintain list of theaters for that particular client, and also list of movies that's getting played on that theaters, and also selling tickets for those movies. So again, selling ticket involves various things. So all these different components involve various things. When you say theaters, we are talking about list of cities. We are talking about countries. If it is a big franchise, and when we talk about movies, we are thinking about various languages and also the movies that that are playing or that we are expecting to see in nearby future. And the tickets, again, it's kind of number of seats or a class of seats. So as you can see, each of them has its own properties, as well as they have own functionalities on them. And what all we are saying is just one single word. So they have kind of a context around it. And then once you have the ticketing system, then you have a payment system. Again, most of us currently using payment gateways. So it's kind of already service oriented and kind of acting as a microservice right now, because it's mostly anyway external system. It's not the time when we are building our own payment gateway system. We just integrate with the system that's already available in the market. And then once the payment is made, we make a notification, which is basically sending an SMS or sending an email to the customer saying your booking has been confirmed, and then informing them that this is a particular ticket reference or something, that they can bring it as a unique number to the theater, and then they can maybe print the ticket, or maybe we even send PDF. And the final is reconciliation. This is more like an internal backend system. So whenever you say word payment, this word is kind of interrelated. So whenever you have a third-party system to take money from a customer, and then you have a ticketing system or a selling system, then you kind of need to, at the end of the day, need to check whether the amount that you paid or amount you received is exactly the same as the number of ticket that you sold, or number of selling item that you sold on the system. So the reconciliation basically involves both the ticketing system and the payment system to make sure that we just sold what we what we paid for. Again, if you think this whole system, if you replace the theater and the movies with any e-commerce product you want, the remaining system remains in the system same. You still need to do kind of a ticketing or a selling point, and you need to make a payment. This is kind of what we are saying about microservices. So if you imagine doing this in Drupal, probably we end up doing everything as a one single website, which is like, we're going to look at why microservices are best for this type of system, or why we should try implementing it in microservices. Imagine you build each one of them in their own installation, and imagine each of those arrows are just like a matter of talking to each other in a REST endpoint. And this way, they don't really need to know what technology they are built on. They just simply need to agree on some kind of a contract, which is our REST endpoint, like sending, I'm expecting a request on this particular format, and you receive a response on this particular format. And this kind of eliminate the barrier of multiple technologies talking to each other, because you are doing REST endpoint. So the underlying software doesn't really matter. And also, it kind of gives us flexibility in a way that it can be built independent of each other if you know exactly what their boundaries are. So here's the advantages of why this is a good idea. So first one is scalability. And if you think about the system, you may not want to scale the theaters, because the theaters are kind of static data. Like, this is where we are talking about how frequently each of these components changes. The movies are kind of changes every week, whereas the ticket changes every minute. Like, the number of seats available, depending on the customer booking, it changes every minute. And the theaters, it's kind of static value. Like, once a year or twice a year, maybe we may get a new theater added into our system. So the scalability point of view, once you build a theater as a separate component, you may not change for like a year or two. And also the number of time you access the data related information may be quite a lot. But since it's kind of a static data, you can use all sort of caching on that system, so that that system doesn't really affect anything in terms of performance. And you can really focus on your performance and giving a heavy backend environment for the things that are changing quite often. In this case, ticketing. That's one of the main things for your particular system here, for selling tickets and making sure it's up to date, the data integrity, and all the other aspects of the tickets availability. You can focus on them and you can invest on it. Whereas the theaters, you just create it and you just build that particular system once and you just leave it there. And the fault isolation, again, because you build everything independently, even the one system has any problem, you can easily isolate that system. And also you can kind of build that system if you have a proper environment. In terms of servers and software, so you can easily spin up that environment. Because it's a REST endpoint, it's kind of, most of them are stateless. We will come to the part of stateless in our further in our discussion. But because it's independent, you can just isolate it and you can even build it separately. And then simple code base, again, because it's not built as a one single system, the code base is pretty simple. It's just focusing on one particular thing. Bringing your new developer into the team or giving a knowledge transfer to any of this system is going to be so simple, because you know it's just doing one particular thing. It's not doing the whole system that you need to learn from, like a one end to another. And then, like I said, there is no technology barrier. Like one of these applications, for example, you may build with email notification, you may build with a totally different technology, not even PHP. It can be totally a different language, different environment. All it needs is an endpoint where you give some details about the booking, and then they send the email for you, or they send an SMS for you. And obviously, because this is an independent system, you don't really need to worry about changing it in the future as well. So there is no technology barrier. It also moves you forward to try some cutting edge technology. For example, theaters, like I said, it is a static data. Instead of using an old system, you can go with a Node.js or something totally new. You can try it, and that allow your system to move to a latest technology, rather than you need to move the whole thing in a one single push, and that may cause a lot of disturbance in terms of your business. Right. So we've seen all great things about microservices. Let's look at Drupal 8, or let's look at how we are doing in general, how we are doing enterprise Drupal website, how deployment and how things works there. So say if you have a Drupal site, either Drupal 7 or 8, if you deploy that site, the first time when you deploy that site in your production environment as well as non-production environment, you just go with the code base and some configurations, and you deploy into the server and you import some content, and it just gives you have a new database and you have new content. And this is how we all start first. And this is kind of an ideal scenario, because there wasn't any database, there wasn't anything in the server. You're just deploying everything fresh from your code base. But we don't have any problem with this step, but anything the further down the line is kind of a little bit adding complexity. So now you have a website running on your production, and now you need a development environment, or one of your new developers starting on your team, and you need to set up an environment for that person. Then basically you need to take a backup of your production database. You need to trim down all the transactional details, or customer details that's not specific to the site. And then you need to take that backup, give it to the developer to deploy with your code base in order to get the environment set up. So again, because the production has a state right now, which is our current system, like what we have in production, we need to keep the database up to date, and we need to keep it local in order to keep sync with what's in the production server. And this is the nth deployment in production. The production, you have a current state, which is, so this is the after the first deployment of production, when you deploy code, you always need to make sure you're updating some data in your production server, because that your production database is the master. So you need to keep up to date with the master, and whatever the changes that you are adding, you need to add on top of master. It's kind of a one way from left to right. So what are the problems? So one of the problem is the DB import. Like, why do we need to keep importing the database? And also the DB import grows over a period of time, and we don't really know what data that we need to keep bringing it into the development environment. And because the production environment is kind of master and you cannot play with the production environment, you end up adding everything back to this your development environment without even you realizing the data that you have might not be related to your development environment, or you may not need it anymore. But still, because its production is master, you need to keep the data up and running to bring the production version into other environment. Also keeping it in the production, you may need to scale it up, you may need to add new servers. Even though you may not need some of the details, you cannot do anything because it is an unknown environment. But like, yeah, you can't really do much about it. And then it also, if you work in a enterprise environment, it also slows down the build process. The build take, like importing this database over a period of time. When the database starts growing, the build take like about 15 to 30 minutes for every single time you want to make a build. The more you give, more the builds are easy in the local environment, the better the code quality, as well as the better the ability to get those bugs or new features out for deployment. But because of this, the growing database as well as the complexity of the site, it really slows down the development. So what are we proposing? We are proposing kind of a simple approach, like the one that we saw initially. Like, you just put a code and some configuration in a version controlled manner, and you deploy into server, and then you just simply update the database. Like, basically, you just create a all new fresh database all the time. And we want to do this for every single time on both production as well as non-production environment. This is not just the first time, this is not end time. You follow the same process every single time for every single environment. This is basically a kind of an ideal scenario we wanna have. But how do we do this one? So before, how do we do? Maybe kind of advantages, like you don't have any zero downtime because there is no kind of a rollback or deployment kind of thing, because everything is on the fly. You are building a new environment fresh. So there's no concept of deployment. You're just creating a new environment, and you're following the same process, which is ideal. And then the versioning is done by Git, branch, and tags. So if you need to revert back to something, then all you need to do is just deploy different tags instead of rolling back certain changes. And then obviously it's very easy to scale because you're just spinning up the box. So that means if you need another box, you just do the same thing. You just spin up another box, and they just kind of act as a load balancers. The restrictions is we have restricted edit points. Basically, we keep so a number of edits or number of updates in a one particular bit. So this way we kind of get the master data. So where the editing data part should be in a one single place. And we also have additional step to export content. Like, again, this is independent of technology. We are thinking about even you do it at some other technology or out of Drupal, you just need to find a way to export the content so that you when you create a new environment, you also get the default content and additional stuff. And there is no, the additional deployment step is basically you need to make sure that you're making the deployment in a very generic way. Currently, you might have one deployment step in non-production, one deployment step in production environment. But if you need to make everything common, you need to make sure that you're covering every single aspect in terms of importing content and configuration. And the managing username passwords, this is again a very specific scenario. Like, if you need to keep user login details, then you may need to kind of consider kind of a state system. But for now, we are not going to go into the user login details. Like, we kind of gonna say it's gonna stay like a stateless system. How the workflow works, and again, this is something like if I have a stateless system, if I'm a content editor, how would I come and edit these details? So you just come the step one is you have the server deployed, you have an instance running, and then as a content editor, I just come and make some changes. Once I'm happy with the changes, I just I just run a job which export those content from the database and import it as a config, and then we commit those config into the code base so that you have both content and config in your code base. When you next build that environment, you have all the changes the content author just made. This is the developer workflow. Yeah, so most of the config changes made by developers, right? So when again, the same build process, step one is doing the same thing, and the step two is the developer makes some changes, and then he does export, and the exports of both config. Most of the time developer does config changes, and that's kind of ideal even in Drupal 8. And then you export the config, and it just again when goes back to the code base, and you just simply import the config. Right, so this is another, okay, it all sounds so good. So let's jump into some small implementation. So imagine, remember our example of theater and movies. So currently, I need to maintain a list of countries and cities for one of my applications. Which is this data is very similar to the theater data. Like a list of reference, we call mostly like a reference data. Like the data is not really related to the transaction, but without them we cannot really work. We just reference them everywhere for the transaction. So we have countries and we have some cities, and we want to keep this. This is a simple Drupal 8 installation, and we have exposed a REST endpoint. Again, we are using the Drupal 8 core REST capabilities here. We expose all the cities and countries related countries they are in, and then the data flow is whenever I make some changes. This is again like I build a website, I just make the changes, I make a pull request. That pull request create these countries and cities, and it commits those cities and countries back to my code base on that REST endpoint. So the CI server hit this, build a new environment with all Drupal installation, hit this endpoint, get this data, commit this data back to my code base so that I can directly access this JSON. So we are kind of going one step further down on the microservices. Instead of exposing just API, we are exposing an API, and also we are getting the data from the API, and we are committing it as a static file. So this is how it looks. So I have a Git repository. So the development branch, which our dev branch, has all the just composer.json. Again, this is another big topic. We don't use any more just the modules. We use just Composer for installing core as well as contrib modules for Drupal 8. So it's all you just need is a few Composer commands. Your environment is just up and running. And then I have another CI job, which is CircleCI is a CI environment that you can hook into your Git repository. So I have a repository called Static API, and I added the CircleCI implementation. So the CircleCI is briefly is a environment where you can spin up a small server, and then they allow you to, they even provide Docker images. So currently I'm using Docker images to spin up a Drupal 8 box, and then hit this endpoint, take the content changes, commit those changes back to the GH pages branch in order to serve this as a static data. So instead of every time when customer access my website asking for cities and countries, I don't really render Drupal. I just simply take the JSON file and just give it to them. So this is how my GH pages looks like. Again, this is another small topic. GitHub pages is another nice way of saving your data, and mostly it's used for documentation. But this example, I'm just committing my static like a reference data into that GH pages so that I can expose the API directly from GitHub. So if my repository name is static API, this is kind of the endpoint that GitHub provides in order to access this data. So again, like I say, I may put this this presentation so you can check this Git repository. So it's just a simple Drupal 8 installation with the default content and config on my profile. So whenever you install this website, you get both config as well as the content that I showed you, and then it's already running an API for you there. So if you don't want that static file concept, like committing the files itself in somewhere, and you feel like your microservice is something more dynamic than just a static data, then you can keep running your Drupal instance so that you can allow the content editors to come and edit those changes. And then the same content editor workflow, you can commit those changes back. And yeah, it just works. You have an API, and your application can hit this API to get these details. And that's kind of all from my side.
So you can ask any questions if you have to Vijay. Any doubts, any clarifications?
Cool.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear Vijay.
Cool.
Yeah, any doubts and clarifications? Praveen, Sharanya, Shadab. Okay. Okay, then thank you so much for joining us, and Vijay, thank you so much for doing this session. I hope they will have some doubts. Anyway, you can reach Vijay through Twitter, or also you can reach us using #dwellindrupal8. So if you have any doubts in future, please let us know. We will be more than happy to help you out. Yeah, stay tuned to us for our next session. Thank you, Vijay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thank you. Bye.